Yo, folks. So this one is about Paul M. Man, he's a phenomenal drummer. He has gone under the radar for so many years, not in the industry, but amongst drummers. Because he's not at all a bling bling kind of drummer, playing, yes, but just in his whole projection, his whole image and everything, he's just a down to earth guy that has made a living playing drums for, I almost want to say, more than the age of all of you looking at me right now. He was there during the California days with session work. He was there during the Nashville days. He's still here. He has done so many recordings, it's daunting. Now, it needs to be said that when he was in the business years ago, he still is, but the business was different. Every time you heard music, whether it was on a TV show, on a commercial, obviously in an album, a jingle, real musicians were being used to perform that music. So the industry was definitely much more geared towards live performers going to the studio, doing sessions, doing multiple sessions per day, and he was a part of that, just as Jeff Porcaro was, just as Vinny Colaiuta was. There are tons of drummers. We're talking about definitely in the 80s, absolutely. I think it's probably started to pick off in the 70s, but it was definitely in the 80s, and then a little bit into the 90s for sure, and then technology and computer sound banks and musicians using one musician using a sound bank and using MIDI to create jingles, whether it was drums or an entire symphony. So it basically took away those jobs, which is really sad because everybody's got to make a living, but in doing so, that whole industry left. And I remember watching a video of Vinny Colaiuta. I think it was a podcast. It might have been a video. Anyway, where he's saying that in California, when they were doing those sessions, it was on different grades. I wasn't there, obviously. I was a little kid at that time. But it was on different grades. And he said even the lowest grade musician, so that means the one that was making the least amount of money per session, there were so many sessions that even that one was still able to buy a house with the sessions he or she was doing. That's how it was. I wish the world was like that today. In Paris, it's obviously not. The French people are terrible with administrative stuff. It would be a nightmare. But I wish that, there was a union where, musicians in Paris signed up, and studios, when they needed a drummer, they just took the list out and called those drummers. And if you were available, you'd go. If you weren't, they'd call the next one. But nowadays, businessmen and women are opting out for MIDI, one man doing MIDI for everything, which kind of sucks. But that's the way it is now. So Paul Leim was a part of that whole circuit, and man, he was doing so many things. When you go to his site and you see the list of all of the stuff he's done, um, it's daunting. You kind of want to say, what world was he living in? When did this happen? Was it really like that? Yes, it was. J.R. Robinson was doing the same thing. Man, and you could see he just liked to play drums. He's still doing that. Doesn't matter the style. Drummers are very easy. You like to play drums as long as the message isn't like rape somebody, kill somebody, shoot somebody down kind of crap. They're good to go, So he was doing country gigs, reggae gigs, R&B gigs, rock gigs, pop gigs, soul gigs, Motown gigs, just kind of crazy. Just the amount of stuff that he was doing is just amazing. If you want to check him out, obviously he would say probably some other albums as reference. But in my life, when I was growing up in the 80s as a little kid, man, and even today, Lionel Richie. He was one of the first drummers to play with Lionel Richie on those very first recordings. And they are phenomenal. The dynamics, the artistry, how to use the drums to progress through the harmonies, through the melodies, through the vocals. I mean, I still listen to it today, probably once a week. And those songs are drumming wise, they are just phenomenal. They are phenomenal. So I highly recommend checking those out. He went on to do all kinds of other stuff. The list is so long that I just don't remember all of them. But I wanted to do this one. I'm going to probably do another one about him in a greater length. This one's going to be a smaller one, but there was a video I saw of him talking on a radio in Nashville. The two guys there, and he's talking, and he's just kind of revealing everything that the scene was like back then, and he's going through, what it's like to be a professional drummer, and he gets to a point where he said, I always wanted to play with James Taylor. And when you know who I'm talking about here, that makes perfect sense. He would be perfect. Perfect. Anyway. So I want you to check out this video. I'm going to show it. But I also, before you watch this, I want you to remember a video I posted saying, I think the title was something like, what it means to be a real music teacher in the music business. And I go on to say, I give a scenario where, if I remember correctly, where I'm offered a gig opening up for Paul McCartney. And would I take it or would I not? And then I go through all of these steps of playing the opening act for Paul McCartney, and then the aftermath of that, and having a family and children. What does that do? And I want you to go back and check that one out. It's about 25 minutes. And the other day, I promise you, I almost stood up and I definitely was clapping. I almost stood up and started clapping, because he says to these guys, he says, I really, really, really wanted to play with James Taylor. And, we have those vibes, when we know who we are and we recognize, we see other musicians play, we say, you know what, I would be really good at that. I could do that. I really want to do that. That's beautiful, And so he apparently had this with James Taylor. Makes complete sense. Anyway, so he says, well, I'll just cut to it. I don't want to speak for him. I'll cut to the video. Here it is right now.
And when you moved to Nashville in 1988, was that, let's go to a little bit more of a slower, a softer pace to raise children? Was that the thing?
Lee had called me to go out with James Taylor.
Nice.
And I'd always wanted to play with James. And one night I told my two little boys, Jacob and Josh, one that's now retiring from the Air Force.
That's crazy.
I said, Daddy's going to take I really want to play with this artist. And I'd already turned down Neil full time, and I was in the middle of doing Lionel Richie. This would have been around '81, and we were still we'd started doing all the Lionel Richie records, and Lee Sklar called to do James, and oh man, I'd love to do that. That'd be awesome. So I told the kids one night, they were, 81. Jacob would have been about 4. The boys were about 3 and 4, and I said, I'm gonna go on tour. I'm gonna do a little traveling.
Yeah.
I've been home just in the studio and being home every night. Well, Daddy, how long are you going to be gone? I said, well, it's a year. Well, Daddy, how long is a year? Well, it's Christmas to Christmas. You know how long Christmas to Christmas is to a 4-year-old?
A long time.
It's a long
Forever.
time.
Yeah. And they started crying, and I would go, well, I'm not leaving tomorrow. It's okay. So you go back and put Jeannie, what should I do? I really want to, but I don't want to leave the kids. And so first day of rehearsal, I was walking out the door, and they started crying, and Jeannie started crying, then I started crying, and I called Lee, and I said, Lee, I can't do this. I can't go. And he said, and I thought he was going to light into.
He said, I understand.
I thought he was going to light into, yeah. He said, Paul, man, thanks for telling me now. He said, because, man, sometimes guys can't take the road and have families. They get out for a month, and they say, I got to go home.
Yeah.
And I've had guys do that to me before as a band leader. But here's the end of that story that happened 30 years later at the White House. We're in the East Wing of the White House, and we're doing the Country at the White House TV special for Obama, and James is on stage, and we'd already rehearsed and everything. I gave him I gave James Taylor the very last the last serial number of my signature snares.
Yeah.
But anyway, because he came back and said, "What's that snare drum?" And I said, "That's my signature snare. What's different about this drum?" Anyway, I'm getting off track.
Oh, that's one of the Yamaha's best-selling signature snare drums.
Yeah, they're going up on the
eBay.
On eBay, yeah. But anyway, so we're in the East Wing of the White House, and James is standing there. We have a little bit of a break, and so I told him the story. That, of course, he didn't even know about it. Lee was the band leader and putting the band together, and I don't even think James knew about it. Yeah. And I told him the story, and he went, "Really?" And then 15 minutes later, he came back and he said, "I didn't get all that." He said, "Paul, tell me that story again." And I told him what had happened. He said, "You made the right choice."
Seems like a super kind soul.
Oh, James is a great guy.
Taylor.
Neil Diamond's a great guy.
Who were
some of them are not.
Who were some of the other?
Isn't that amazing? I almost wanted to cry. That man is a beautiful man. And I hope his children know that story. Because that is what it's all about. And when I was talking about those scenarios and how the industry can literally destroy you because you eventually find yourself needing money after that first phenomenal gig is over, then what do? And you have to actually find a gig, and you end up, most cases, playing a gig that you don't like for the money, because you need the money. In Paul's case, he didn't even need the money. Paul could get a gig at that point with a lot of people. It wasn't even about the money. He made a decision to not leave his children. Even though he loved to play, he wanted to go on tour, he wanted to experience that thing with James Taylor, it wasn't even about money. Which, that's the way it should be. No, I can't do this. I can't leave a year, Christmas to Christmas, and let my children grow and miss that and take me out of their lives. He's a real man. That is the way it should be. And I just thought, I'm cutting this in, putting this into the middle of this, I thought of another one. Eric Martin. Eric Martin is the singer for a colossal 80s group, Mr. Big. Now, Eric Martin was originally auditioning for Toto. And he didn't get the gig. Story goes they thought his voice was a little too young for Toto. Whatever. I love Toto anyway, but that's what I heard. And he ends up landing a gig with Mr. Big. Mr. Big becomes gigantic in the 80s. Huge 80s rock, gigantic. Then all of a sudden, if you look back in history, what happens? No more Eric Martin. Mr. Big just kind of vanishes from the scene. Just dissolves into thin air. Huge group. One of the largest in the 80s. Next to Van Halen, Poison. There was a ton of that style. Mr. Big, and just suddenly gets erased from the map. Then comes out an interview many years later, where you hear Eric Martin say, now Eric Martin, okay, he can sing, he is way up there. He is a phenomenal singer. So to just suddenly take himself off the map in the music industry, you go like, what happened? Did somebody get sick or something? You know, what happened? Why did you do that? Interview comes out. He's got short hair, glasses on. He says, what does he say? He said, I had kids. Eric Martin, you too are a great man. We're talking way up on the top. And this man has the responsibility to say, guys, I can't do this anymore. I got my kids to raise. And as such, Mr. Big gets erased from the map. And in the interview, if you were to see that, when he says, I can't do it, I got kids, I had to stop. What was I going to do? I couldn't go on tour and have my wife raise these kids or whatever and not have... I couldn't do it. I had to stop. every once in a while you do find those wonderful stories. I just wanted to add that one in there of another guy of a high caliber singing his butt off that said, I gotta stop. Priorities, responsibility, family. I'll cut back to my original thing with Paul now. And that's why I posted my video in the first place. Because I've already seen that happen, and I've already fought to not do that. And it seems something so crazy, because when you're 20 years old and you don't have any obligations, you think that that's what you should do even when you do have obligations. Go. That's your career. That's your life, No. Especially when your children are young. A year, they grow up faster than you can imagine in a year. I mean, it's a different person. And I wholeheartedly applaud him for doing what he did. He did not go on tour. He came out after the first session and said, listen, I can't do this. I can't leave my children for a whole year. Yes, I love this music. Yes, I can do it. Yes, I'd make buckets of money. Probably with James Taylor. But I can't do this. And there is the unsung hero. Because most drummers, most musicians do it. And that sucks. Most musicians do it. And you know what? Some of those musicians, because they do it, die. We just experienced that a few years ago with a very big drummer named Taylor Hawkins. Died. And he didn't want to go. News came out that he didn't want to go. He was struggling with being away from his family. It rips you up. What kind of world are we living in? Especially when the other members, rips you up, and you actually start taking medication and drugs and stuff because you want to essentially like comatose yourself into forgetting the pain of being away from your family. It's a crazy world. And Taylor Hawkins died because of it. You know another one that did? There's tons like this. It's crazy that people haven't figured this out yet. One of the... John Bonham. John Bonham didn't want to... He was getting fed up and sick and tired of the road and doing everything that he was doing. And to compensate for it, he drank like a fish. And died. It, excuse my language, sucks. To do that stuff, to rip yourself away from your family. He wanted to be back with his family. Back with his children. He had Jason Bonham as a little boy. Robert Plant lost his child too. It is a rough road. That is rough beyond rough, man. Losing children, that is rough. John Scofield lost a child too. I don't know for what. Eric Clapton. There's a ton of musicians that get pulled into that thing, and it might not necessarily be their fault, but they get into a situation like I expressed in that other video where they can't get out. The system won't allow them to get out once you get in. Partially because the last step is you become in debt anyway, and it literally rips you to shreds. It destroys you. And thank the Lord, Paul, I'm going to look right into the camera. You're a great man, Paul. You're a great man. When I saw Paul say that, man, I almost cried. And his children need to watch him, need to know that story. They probably do. And how he was a responsible father. We're not all perfect, okay? But he stood up for his children and their presence. And he didn't go on tour. That would have got him a lot of success. James Taylor, give me a break. You know, one of the largest at that time, he was up there with Lionel Richie and everybody else. James Taylor was huge. Same thing with Neil Young. Huge. James Taylor probably even more back then. You know. I don't know. Neil Young was pretty big. But just goes to show you that, you know, I just was hit when I saw him say that. And it reminded me of that post that I did. And there you go. And in my post, out of respect for the musicians that I know that have gone through that crap, I didn't say their names. But here, look at that post again. I mean, look at that video I posted up within this one. Listen to it again. Here is a concrete example of a man that could easily have done it. Put his name with James Taylor. And didn't. For the health and the presence of himself with his family. Bravo, man. That is what this world needs more today. Props. Props. You take that vibe, that perspective of what life and family is all about, and you add that to everything that he was able to do, keeping that aspect in check, you got a great man. Paul M. Hands down, one of the best. And not just on drumming. Check it out. Cheers.